Good afternoon, Patriots. Welcome back to my channel. This is Constitution Vet, and today we're going to dive into a topic that many of you are familiar with. Most of y'all have heard this. Most of y'all have sung this. And sadly, there are people out there who hate it. That topic is the Star Spangled Banner. This topic was suggested by one of my subscribers. And I realized that's a great idea. Heck yeah, we should do it. So I want to give a quick little shout out to Mocade. Mocade. I think that's right. So Mocade, thank you so much for your suggestion. It's an awesome idea. Also, if anyone else has any ideas for future videos, please put a comment, shoot me an email. That would probably be better. Just shoot me an email and I'll be more than happy to do some research and create a video about that topic. I think that's a great idea, and I think that could really create some really interesting videos. So again, thank you, Mr. Mocade. Let's get into it. What do the brave patriots below and this flag have in common? The answer? Both never surrendered. This is the actual flag that was flown over Fort McHenry during the British bombardment in 1814. This was a single battle in the larger War of 1812. This battle contributed to lyrics in a song that have bounded our country together, that have united Americans from all walks of life. Now, if you notice, this flag's a little bit different. There's only 15 stars and 15 stripes. Obviously, the American flag has evolved considerably over time. But this flag is special. It's this flag that kept flying after over 24 hours of bombardment by the British. It was this flag that Francis Scott Key saw. It was that flag that inspired this man to write down the poem, The Star Spangled Banner, which then was put to music and made into a song. The most important song in our country, our national anthem. Now, this video is going to be a very brief summary of the history of that battle. Afterward, I'm going to transition into an emotional context, an explanation as to why I personally love this flag. So let's get into it together. When you think of the beginning of US history, what war typically comes to mind? Most people would think of the Revolutionary War, which makes sense. It was obviously a big deal and it gained our independence. Awesome. But it was the War of 1812 that really cemented what it means to be an American. Obviously, we got involved in many more wars long after that. But the War of 1812 is often overlooked. And yet, I think it deserves just as much or even more attention than the American Revolution, mainly because it was this war that we almost lost. It was this war where the empire did strike back, where the British sailed back to this new fledgling country and viewed it as, you rebel scum, you think you beat us in the first revolution? We'll come back in 1812 and we'll show you who the real rulers are. And guys, they almost won. They burnt our capital down to the ground. People forget about that. They burnt Washington, D.C. to the ground. They were on their way to win this war. It wasn't until 1814 that the British arrived at Fort McHenry. Now, just so we're on the same page, let me share my screen here for a second and show you where this fort is. This is right next to Baltimore, Maryland. This is where Fort McHenry was located. So as y'all can see, it was a very strategic decision, not just to burn down our capital, but also to move to the next most powerful city in the area, and that was Baltimore. More importantly, it was a crucial port in the region. If the British were able to destroy Fort McHenry and capture Baltimore, they would have won. And we might be speaking the Queen's English right now. Now, as a little spoiler alert, the British did not win, and they sailed down to New Orleans, thinking, oh, well, don't worry, chaps. If we just capture the Mississippi River, they'll be forced to surrender. Well, newsflash, they lost that battle too. But that's another video for another time. Regardless, though, the importance of Fort McHenry is not to be underestimated. On September 13, 1814, the British fleet, led by Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane, controlled this area, and he ordered his ships to commence firing on Fort McHenry. The idea was to lay siege and hopefully force the Americans to surrender. To give you an idea of what Fort McHenry looked like, here's a modern day photo right here. As you can tell, this is a star fort. This design typically does a really good job at defending against any type of sieges, bombardments, things like that. This previous image is a primary source. It's a drawing of a view of the bombardment of Fort McHenry. They basically forced all American resistance back into the fort. And so we were surrounded by the British Navy and the British Army on this side as well. It was not looking good. So this was a desperate last stand for our American forces. However, it was not a last stand, and it was not desperate. The American forces inside this fort had phenomenal aim. They were able to man the cannons and destroy all the British ships that were closer. They were also able to repel all land advances by the British Army. It was because of that that the Vice Admiral Cochrane decided to lob mortars at the fort. And so for over 24 hours, the British bombarded the fort. Major George Armistead was the officer in charge of leading the defense of this fort. After 24 hours of non-stop bombardment by the British Navy, dawn came. And Vice Admiral Cochrane was expecting to see the white flag being raised at the top of this flagpole. The most powerful empire in the world had successfully burnt down our nation's capital, conquered Baltimore, had a land force stationed behind here, encircled this fort by naval forces, and bombarded it for 24 plus hours. Any reasonable British officer would expect nothing less than the white flag to be raised on top of this fort. That following morning, the battle-wearied British Army and Navy looked forward at the fort, and instead of a white flag, saw this. Now, from the perspective of Francis Scott Key, he was actually a prisoner on board one of the British ships. See, a few days earlier, Francis Scott Key boarded a British ship to negotiate the release of an American prisoner. Even though the negotiations were successful, the British aren't stupid. They're not going to let these Americans off the ships right after they've heard and seen valuable intel by the British officers. So they kept them on board as prisoners. Fast forward to the day of the bombardment. Francis Scott Key was on the ship during the entire battle. So think about this for a second. You are a prisoner on board this British ship. You don't know what's going on. All you hear is constant fire for 24 plus hours. When it's all said and done, do you think Francis Scott Key honestly expected to see this flag? Probably not. He was probably expecting to see the white flag of surrender. He was probably preparing to be tried and possibly hung as a traitor. Instead, he saw this: the Star Spangled Banner still flying, still waving in that sky. Once Vice Admiral Cochrane saw this, he knew that the American forces had not surrendered. They're still in this fight, and they will never surrender. With that defeat, the British forces then sailed down towards New Orleans and tried another battle in hopes to gain control of America again. And that was the Battle of New Orleans. Fast forward to 1815, I believe. This is where it gets really cool. Francis Scott Key saw this and wrote down his honest feelings. Hence the words, the Star Spangled Banner. Upon seeing that flag still fly, you can imagine how emotional he was when writing down these words to a poem. He didn't originally intend it to be a song, but over time it became a song. Think about a time in your life where you've been up against the rope, so to speak, or a time where you have been beat down again and again and again and again. Think about all the times in your life where you feel like you cannot get a break, where you've been fighting nonstop for that thing or whatever, but you still keep going. You still keep fighting. There's that phrase you've probably heard as a child: if you fail, just try again. Well, sometimes you can't just try again. Sometimes you can't just get back up and dust yourself off. Sometimes all you can do is just crawl. Sometimes you may only be able to crawl forward an inch, maybe even a centimeter, but take heart and know that whatever you're going through in your life right now, whatever is beating you down, whatever is tearing you apart, whatever is bombarding your fort, just know to keep crawling forward. Never surrender. Never submit. You may be face down in your own pit of crap right now, and you may not be able to get up, and that's okay. Crawl. Just keep crawling forward. As long as you keep crawling forward, even by an inch, you haven't surrendered. You haven't quit. And so going back to the historical topic, when Francis Scott Key finished writing those words, just imagine for a moment, just imagine how elated he must have been, knowing that flag had to have been raised by someone who probably saw their best friend die, someone who's been fighting tooth and nail to defend something that was worth defending. On your right, you see the most powerful navy in the world, tearing you to pieces. And on the left, you see the most powerful military in the world, ready to tear you apart. And yet, you still hold your ground. You still raise that flag. And by doing so, all of a sudden, that great, almighty, powerful force goes away. They surrender. They submit. The American flag itself, for me, is not just a piece of fabric. It's not just a flag that you can buy at a store and just fly. It's way more personal than that. As y'all know, I did serve in the Air Force for almost 9 years. My military service obviously gave me another perspective to the American flag, but it was my time in the Air Force Honor Guard that gave me a whole new appreciation for that flag. This is me at 19 years old when I first joined the Air Force Honor Guard. Now, if y'all don't know this, the Air Force Honor Guard is actually separated into two portions. One portion is in DC. The other portions are all throughout the world at different bases. I was part of the Air Force Base Honor Guard. This is back when I was stationed in Charleston, South Carolina. My time as a ceremonial guardsman was honestly the best days of my life. That was the highlight of my Air Force career. Being able to do this is really what made everything worth it. All the crap you had to put up with, all the stupid BS, all the ills of military service were all worth it because of times like this. when you put aside, sorry, I get a little emotional during this. When you put aside your personal feelings, your gripes, your complaints, all that crap doesn't matter. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is you giving that last bit of respect, that last honor to those who made the ultimate sacrifice. If you notice, this is a flag draped casket. In the military service, when you do pass away, your casket is draped by your nation's flag. Same thing in Canada, UK, Germany, Australia, all that. So the American flag for me was way more important because that flag is no longer a piece of fabric. It is that person. It is the person who died serving their country. It is the person who made a sacrifice at some point in time for their country. So whenever I see the flag being mistreated, mishandled, not taken care of properly, not being hung properly, it personally affects me. It personally offends me. But now y'all understand where I come from. The Star Spangled Banner is our national anthem. It clearly has an emotional impact, and it does bring people together. There are those Marxists out there that make YouTube videos or make articles that say the American national anthem is racist, or it's really bad, it's really terrible. That's their right. They're using their freedom of speech. I don't agree with it, but that's their right. But one thing that most people don't think about is the emotional attachment other countries have to their national anthems. And I saw this firsthand when I was deployed in the desert. The worst days on the flight line were the ramp ceremonies. To show respect, I'm not going to display images of these ramp ceremonies on here, but y'all can Google them yourself. These ramp ceremonies are when you fall in battle, you die while overseas, and your transfer case is draped with your nation's flag, and you are carried by your brethren onto the aircraft. And then the aircraft takes you back to wherever country you were from. When I was in Kandahar, Afghanistan, I saw these ramp ceremonies on a regular basis. And being that it was a NATO base, all the countries that are part of NATO were there. It wasn't just the American forces. It was also the Brits, the Aussies, the Canadians, the Dutch, the German, every country under NATO. When they lost one of their soldiers in battle, they would have a ramp ceremony. And as heartbreaking as it was, what was really special and really heartwarming was that if a Canadian soldier fell, it wasn't just Canadians out there on the ramp showing their love and loyalty to their fallen comrade. It was other countries too. But one thing that stood out to me that I'll never forget, every single ramp ceremony that happened, no matter what country it was, no matter who it was, didn't matter. There was always one person away from everyone else's information, away from the aircraft, who played Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. Every single time. Obviously, I get a little emotional about this because just like Francis Scott Key had a connection with that flag, still waving, still flying, just like the connection most Americans have with the Star Spangled Banner, I have a personal connection with Amazing Grace. So in closing, I hope this video provided y'all some very basic context, not just to the history of the Star Spangled Banner, but also to the emotional context to our national anthem. And understanding why it was such a big deal for those words to be written. Why it was such a huge deal for that event in particular to serve as the basis for our national anthem. It wasn't just written on a whim. It wasn't written down in some tavern like, oh yeah, this will be a great song. No, it was written in the moment where we thought we were going to lose. It was created right when we realize that we are not done yet. We are not defeated. We are still fighting. And we're just farmers. We're fishermen. We are drunk tavern keepers. We are those who resist and bite. We are the rebel scum. And yet, somehow, we still managed to fight back and defeat the most powerful empire in the world, not once, but twice. The American Revolution and the War of 1812. So for you in your lives, not all is lost. If you think your fight is done, it's not. If you think you can't keep going forward, guess what? You can. The British forces represent the Soviet overlords of this platform. Be the fort. Be those soldiers in the fort. Be that soldier who raises the flag. And never back down. Never surrender. Never submit. This is Constitution Vet. Signing.